How are you?
I'm really happy and excited to be able to talk to you for a few minutes. I met you at the meeting in New Jersey, at JT's meeting. I was the one who asked you to sign my picture of me in the
Okay.
high top white Reeboks several decades ago.
So, yes, several decades ago. We've been around a long time now.
I have to tell you, I think I wore those shoes at least 2 decades. I mean, they were one of the best shoe designs I've ever had in my life, and I'm a real shoe person. And they just
Okay,
looked great
very
with
nice.
everything. And they were leather, but an athletic shoe. They were something else. So I come from that. I'm a fashionista, a little bit of full appreciation of shoes. But what I really want to talk to you about today is how resilient you are in your career, because I'm reading your book is amazing. Like all the hardship you had, but you looked at everything so creatively and you made something great out of so many things. I mean, I'm not quite finished. I'm at the part where you're showing Paul the factory and you're showing him the races where they're all wearing your shoes, and it's
Right.
like right before it's really going to get crazy.
Yes.
And I've been suffering these first 158 or 70 pages of all the stuff that you went through. I'm impressed.
Oh,
What
thank you.
what what do you think was the most difficult? Because you had some big obstacles.
We did have some big, and quite a few of those obstacles were quite difficult. But we learned to enjoy it. We learned to
Uh,
take it as a challenge and see what we could. How can we turn a problem or even a failure into a success? How can we turn it? How can we pivot that way and just say, okay, we're doing something wrong, or people don't want us to go that way. We've got the wrong name. We've got the wrong silhouette because we had to change both. And I mean, those were challenges. I think the biggest challenge we had, though, was when I decided that we got to a certain size in the UK, and it was a question of do we increase our product offering? In other words, do we go into other products like soccer? But soccer was still owned by Adidas, and that was difficult to get into.
wow.
Would have cost a lot of money. Or do we increase our territory? In other words, we're in the UK. Do we go to Europe and then introduce ourselves to Europe, or do we go to America? Europe was nearer, but Europe has 400 million people, but there's 27 countries and 27 languages and a lot of different culture. Whereas in America, we more or less speak the same language. We can be understood. And the 350 million people in America have far more disposable income, even at that time, far more
That's really
disposable.
true, isn't it? That
Yes.
I noticed when I traveled in Europe and I was with women, this was the 80s, and I was traveling with my husband who was working for MasterCard. And I would be with the wives, in like Belgium, and they would buy one outfit a year. And it would be a
Right.
designer outfit,
Yeah.
like thousands of dollars, but they didn't buy like Americans.
No.
It was really interesting. Such a different culture. One thing I also really enjoyed in your book was, well, first of all, you have the same initials as your grandfather, and that's JW, and same name and birthday, which is crazy. And
Absolutely. Yes.
my first stepfather was a JW, so I related to that, Joseph William. And I really feel like your grandmother thought you were reincarnated from your grandfather, from the way
No,
but that's another thing. The way you wrote was charming, and it got got me so into the characters. I really think it'd be a good movie or a mini series.
well, you're not the only one to say that. So we're listening to anybody. And I had a man on earlier this morning who was an actor and it was in films, but he was also in realty. But he was sort of saying it reads like a movie script. So
It
he was.
does. It doesn't. And your description is so good. There's a couple phrases. I wrote them down because I was, I don't, well, and there were a lot of gems too. Tell me, what is duck egg blue? Because you said this brilliant thing, how you needed to save money on materials. So you bought leather from car manufacturers, and you had red, insipid beige, I think you said, and then a duck egg blue. What is a duck egg blue?
It's a very light blue, very
That
light.
sounds like a
Just,
robin's egg, kind of very pale.
just a hint of blue. So duck egg blue is just a hint of blue. It's not a deep color.
It is like robin egg blue.
I have one other question that's not really relevant to all the gems of wisdom you're giving in the book, but I had a big curiosity as to what does it mean? You said, this is a fun question. Well, you said ex-football players had sports shops selling everything from boots to snooker cue chalk. What is that?
Well, snooker is something like pool. You play
Oh,
pool.
okay. Got it. Okay. So for the
Snooker
cue,
is
for the,
pool. So you chalk the
sorry,
end of your cue. Yes,
I'm
I
gonna,
know. Particularly British,
well,
that.
but I know, and I'm kind of fascinated with that. And I love the story of how you chose the Reebok name. That was really fascinating. That you had to come up with a new name,
Yes.
and you came up with one. I used to be a graphic designer, so I'm very into type, and I noticed the R has a line in it that looks like it's going forward and says the K. So their letters like they look they're in motion.
Yes.
You know what I'm
Yes.
saying? It's like
Yeah.
the letters relate to what you're doing. Did that ever occur to you, or maybe it's subconscious? But it occurred to me right away that of any letters, these look like they're in motion.
Well,
That's just an artist thing.
yeah, we do have a book which is more or less a brand book. It's not a book that's on general public sale. It's mainly the distributors which have it, and it's like a coffee table book, and that shows you the progression of our different styles of writing Reebok. We started, and it must have been, we must have had at least 6 different variations until we eventually ended up with the Motta Textura, and the one that we have today, which is
Nice.
in fact, it was the same lettering as Apple. Apple started off with Motta Textura. They have slightly changed it over time, but I don't know whether we started with Motta Textura before Apple or whether Apple started before we did. So I don't know who started first, but that is Motta Textura. It works on Reebok. It doesn't work on every word you can bring out.
Oh, okay. Thank you for that. And I wanted to also thank you for several concepts that you brought up that I never really thought of, but really kind of apply. Like sometimes you're popping your head above the parapet and may not have good consequences. And that was just so graphic to me, because
Right.
it's true. Sometimes you can't like hold back because you're all excited and you may do something that's a little, maybe not the appropriate thing at that moment for your business.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Very
And I
true.
thought that I really enjoyed that. The other one I really liked was punching above one's weight.
Yes. Yeah.
That was,
I think we did that a lot.
well, I think you have to maybe try to do that and see if you can, like looking for the boundaries, maybe if you have the opportunity, but you have to really kind of stay in your lane sometimes too, I guess. But I found a lot of learning in you. It had a lot of gems, and I was really, I didn't expect to get so into the story. And I
Right.
love the part about your grandfather, the shoes that he made and the race that he ran in, and the shoe fell apart. I was so dramatic. You know, it really took me right there, and I could picture him running and then the piece of the shoe coming off. And then are the other runners going to fall over it? And what did he make the spikes out of? I have all these questions for you like this. I'm sorry, Joe.
The spikes were forged. They're forged. It's a bit like a nail. They forged them,
Wow.
and it's called drop forging. So it's liquid metal, and it's poured into a mold, and the mold made the spike. And these days, most of this now is done on a lathe, is turned on an automatic lathe. So they're automatic. There's not much forging now, but in his day, he would use the blacksmith, the blacksmith.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow.
We'd use a blacksmith, and they would forge the spikes.
He was really ahead of his time.
Well, he was pushing the envelope. Yes, he was. He was looking. What can I do that's different? And of course, this is why his shoe fell apart, because you've got to keep trying. You try something that see if it will work. And of course, there was. The problem is, of course, he didn't have the patience to do what he should have done, and that's sew both of the soles on. He should have sewn it on, but he actually got so impatient to make his pair of spikes that he actually nailed on the sole of the one that came apart.
So then the nails were coming to the foot.
Well, if you use your nail and you do it like on an anvil, once the nail goes through, it bends over and flattens.
Oh, you bend it.
Yeah, it doesn't just stick up there. No, it goes flat. So in those days, yes, that's pushing the envelope and trying something new.
But I think you remind me of him a lot, the way you wrote about him. The way you always figured out a good way to do it. You figured out a way to using the people who were doing it was brilliant marketing at first to start really, accomplished runners advertising for you.
Yes.
And then the football players in the shops knew who you were. I mean, there was just so much real well thought. I mean, I'm inspired. You've inspired me in a lot of ways.
Well, we didn't have a lot of money, so we had to be creative.
Well, that's the thing too. And I mean, you really went through some hardship.
Yes.
You really do. But do you look back on it like it was great times, like it was stimulating and fabulous, or does it freak you out? Is it like,
It's
I guess
amazing
it's both.
when you're young, it's amazing what you can do. You're young, you're inexperienced, and it is so amazing. So we just did the same as grandfather. We experimented a lot. We were willing to I won't say suffer, but go through some experiences that normally you wouldn't want to go through. But we love to go through those experiences, and we love to turn the disasters and the failures and the problems. We love to turn them into an advantage. We always wanted to say, how can we make this to our advantage? What can we do? How can we make it work for us and change where we are? And we would pivot. We would just change. Yeah, we can do this. So we had to change our name. We had to change our silhouette, and we came up with a better name, and we came up with a better silhouette.
And you
so
kept at it because you had the diligence and the persistence, and getting distributors in the US, that seemed to be a really difficult one to manage.
It was
That seemed to be, well, from what I read so far, that may have been the biggest obstacle because it's so big in numbers, and to make that happen, that's so impressive because you do need the resources, you do need the capital, you do need so much. I mean, how do you, when you're just filling orders and making income from that, how do you pay everyone and still expand like that? Yeah, it's pretty fascinating.
We had a reasonably good business in the United Kingdom, so we had something always to come out of the UK, try again into America. But we tried hard to get the influence into the market, and it wasn't until really Runner's World gave us the 5-star.
Got the 5-star.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Once we got 5 stars, that was a credential. That really was the influence for the market.
That was amazing that they changed to that instead of the best shoe of the year to do the 5-star, and that they said as soon as you get that, I think that's the next page I'm reading. So I'm about to get to the really good part.
Oh, well, we'll not talk too much about that then. Again, we'll wait till you read it.
Well, it is a fabulous read. I didn't expect it. I thought it was more of an advice book, a motivation book, but I just got so into your family's pretty fascinating. And it's really interesting, the history you have in shoes, like the making of shoes, but not just making them, but really caring about the functionality and the performance of the wearer. I've never seen anywhere where that was that developed. I guess starting with your grandfather's interest in running and sports, and then that came down to you. It's fascinating. No other shoe manufacturer can talk like that, right?
Well, I think so. We were manufacturers. Nike were not manufacturers. Adidas were manufacturers, and they were. I don't know too much about the story, but their story is quite interesting because they came through the war, and the Dasslers were part of the Nazi organization. They were.
Oh, I didn't.
Yes, and they keep that fairly quiet because I think anybody who was in Germany either worked with them or were in prison. so I think you had to work with what was in front of you, and
exactly.
It's a reasonable story. I think. Can you remember the name of the Adidas book? Is it Pitch
Invasion?
Pitch Invasion, I think it's called. I'm just trying to. What was she called? The woman who Smith? Barbara Smith.
Oh, yeah, Schmidt.
Yeah.
Schmidt, I think it is.
I think it's Barbara Smith and Pitch Invasion. So if you wanted to read the Adidas story, it's
Pitch Invasion?
Pitch Invasion, yes. By Barbara Smith. I think SMI.
Thank you. I'm writing it down.